They called him the Dapper Don, the man who wore $1,000 suits, smiled for the cameras, and walked out of courtrooms like a movie star. John Gotti wasn't just a gangster, he was a celebrity. And for a while, it seemed like he'd made the Mafia bulletproof. But empires like his never die overnight. They fade, they mutate, and sometimes they simply change their clothes. Welcome to What Happened to the Gotti Empire, the untold story of how one of America's most infamous mob dynasties didn't end with a prison sentence. It just went underground. To understand what happened to the Gotti family, you first need to understand why John Gotti mattered so much. Before him, the Mafia was built on silence, on omertà. Bosses stayed in the shadows. They avoided cameras, publicity, even their own names in print. Gotti changed all that. He was brash, loud, photogenic. He turned organized crime into organized fame. When the newspapers called him the Teflon Don because nothing ever stuck, he didn't hide. He smiled. He loved it. For a while, America did too. But the Gotti story didn't start with John. It started with Carlo Gambino, the quiet, calculating boss who built the Gambino crime family into the most powerful mafia syndicate in the country. When Gambino died in 1976, power passed to his cousin, Paul Castellano, a businessman at heart, not a street fighter. Castellano wanted to modernize the mafia, run it like a corporation. He banned drug dealing, insisted on cleaner money, but he forgot one thing. You can't tell gangsters not to make money. That's where John Gotti came in. Gotti was pure street. Born in the Bronx, raised in East New York, one of the roughest neighborhoods in America. By his 20s, he was hijacking trucks and robbing mob-connected warehouses. By 30, he was a made man in the Gambino family. He had charisma, violence, and loyalty, the kind of man others followed instinctively. But he also had ambition, too much for Castellano's liking. When the boss started ignoring the street guys, Gotti saw an opening. In December 1985, as Castellano stepped out of a car outside Sparks Steakhouse in Manhattan, Gotti's men ambushed him. Bullets flew, Castellano fell, and a new era began. Overnight, John Gotti became a household name. TV cameras swarmed him as he left court hearings, always perfectly dressed, always grinning. He went to jail and walked free, again and again. The public saw him as a folk hero, a rebel taking on a corrupt system. But the FBI saw him as a problem they had to solve. And they did, not through bullets, but through recordings. Agents bugged the Ravenite Social Club, Gotti's headquarters in Little Italy. There they heard him talk openly, too openly, about murders, payoffs, betrayals. In 1992, the Teflon finally cracked. Gotti was convicted on all counts: murder, racketeering, conspiracy, and sentenced to life in prison. The King of New York was done, or so it seemed. That's where most documentaries stop, but this one isn't about the rise. It's about what came after. Because when Gotti went to prison, his family didn't vanish. His son, John Gotti Jr., stepped in. For a while, he tried to run things quietly, under the radar. But the FBI was watching. He was indicted multiple times for racketeering and loan sharking. Each time, the jury couldn't reach a verdict. And like his father, he walked, earning him a new nickname, the Teflon Son. By the mid-2000s, John Gotti Jr. claimed he had left the life behind. He said he'd retired, gone straight. But in mafia circles, retired doesn't always mean gone. Meanwhile, the streets were changing.
The old-school mob was losing its grip. New York's economy shifted. Construction, gambling, nightlife, all now regulated or digitized. Where Gotti once ruled with charisma and fear, now corporations ruled with contracts and wire transfers. And yet whispers persisted about hidden investments, shell companies, real estate deals with Gotti family fingerprints. Nothing proven, nothing solid. Just the lingering ghost of power. Then came the rebrand. The Gotti name, once feared, became a brand. Reality TV shows, documentaries, even a feature film starring John Travolta. The family leaned into the myth. John Gotti Jr. wrote a book. His sister, Victoria, starred in Growing Up Gotti. The public couldn't decide. Were they gangsters or celebrities? Victims of their own legacy or architects of it? Maybe both. But beneath the pop culture veneer, something deeper remained. The Gotti empire wasn't just about crime. It was about image, power through reputation, control through perception. And in that sense, they were ahead of their time. Today, reputation is currency. Influence is power. In a strange way, John Gotti predicted the influencer era, a world where image is everything and loyalty has a price. John Gotti died in prison in 2002, but his legend and the machinery that built it never really disappeared. The Gambino family still exists, still operates in the shadows, quieter, smaller, smarter. They don't need cameras anymore. They learned from Gotti's mistakes. Now the new bosses work like executives, blending crime, business, and politics. You won't see them on magazine covers. You'll see their investments in construction firms, logistics, nightclubs, maybe even tech. So what happened to the Gotti empire? It didn't collapse. It evolved. The suits got darker, the smiles got smaller, but the code stayed the same. Money, loyalty, silence. Because in the end, the Gotti story isn't about one man. It's about transformation, the evolution of the American Mafia from street corners to boardrooms. As one old associate once said, Gotti made the mob famous. His sons made it invisible. And maybe that's the real lesson. Power doesn't die. It just changes its shape.